Now, listen close, because you think you know the story of Knock. You think you know about the blessed vision in the pouring rain, the silent apparition of Our Lady of Knock. But what if I told you that the silence that night wasn't reverence? What if I told you it was a secret, a cover-up woven into the very fabric of that gray, August evening? There were 15 souls who claimed to witness the impossible, but only one, the very youngest, Moira Glynn, knew the true reason the parish guard hurried them all away. And that truth, me darlings, is darker and more human than any miracle. Ah, the grand, green heart of Mayo, a place where the rain falls sideways and the stories run deep. The year was 1880, not 1879, mind you. We're in a new age of doubt and a creeping cynicism even amongst the peat smoke and prayers. Forget what the old books tell you. We're talking about Knock, a village clinging to the hillside, where life was a heart-knuckle fight against the cold and the soil. The whole world remembers the date when the apparition supposedly took place, but nobody remembers the little things, the tiny, unsettling details. And that's where our story begins, with a wee slip of a girl named Moira. Moira Glynn wasn't like the other children scampering around the stony fields of Mayo at 7 years old. She had eyes that seemed to hold all the melancholic fog of the Atlantic. She didn't dream of angels or saints. She dreamed of the day she could finally escape the suffocating presence of her aunt and uncle, Agnes and Seamus Nolan. Seamus was the local stone carver, a quiet man whose hands knew the weight of granite, and Agnes, well, Agnes had a temper as sharp as a newly honed scythe. They lived in a tight little cottage, smelling of damp wool and boiled cabbage, right on the edge of the parish grounds, a proximity that felt less like protection and more like being constantly watched. The vision, as the papers and the official church documents would later call it, was the night everything changed. A night where a handful of locals claimed they saw a spectral scene on the gable end of the old parish church, Our Lady of Knock, St. Joseph, St. John, and an altar with a lamb. But, to Moira, the scene was unsettling, not holy. The official story is a beautiful tapestry of faith, but the real frayed threads lie with Moira and what she was doing just moments before she was dragged into the light. You see, Moira had a secret ritual. Every evening, just before sundown, she'd sneak out to the wall behind the church where the old Nolan family tomb stood, the resting place of her own mother, who died in childbirth, a tragedy Agnes never let Moira forget. This tomb was where Moira would leave a single smooth piece of river stone, a small act of defiance against her aunt's constant, pious surveillance. On that famous evening, however, the sky was a bruised purple and the rain was starting its long, miserable descent. Moira wasn't just leaving a stone. She was looking for something that had been hidden there days before, a small silver locket, a forgotten heirloom her uncle Seamus had once slipped her, telling her to keep it secret from Agnes as she knelt down, her fingers scratching at the moss and the loose earth right by the base of the tombstone, a tombstone, mind you, that Seamus himself had carved with a curious, off-center cross. She heard the murmur, not a heavenly choir, but human voices, hushed and urgent, coming from the shadowed recess of the gable wall. Moira froze, her tiny heart hammered like a Bodhran drum. This wasn't the sound of prayer. It was the low, serious sound of argument. And then, a flicker, not a celestial glow, but a sudden, harsh flash, like a lamp being lit and then instantly covered. Moira, driven by a child's pure, unthinking curiosity, crept along the wall, flattening herself against the cold, damp stone. She reached the corner of the gable and cautiously peeked around. The scene wasn't a static tableau of saints. It was movement. Figures were shuffling, their dark forms visible through a thin, almost theatrical sheet, a canvas that seemed to be crudely suspended from the roofline. And one of them, a tall, imposing figure, was shouting, his voice a low, furious rumble. He was struggling with someone smaller, someone who looked utterly terrified. It was not the Mother of God appearing. It was a desperate, ultra-earthly confrontation. The figures were draped, yes, but not in robes of glory. They were shrouded in the practical, heavy darkness of the evening. The lamb on the altar was no lamb at all, but a small, carefully positioned stone lantern, casting that strange, flickering light through a gauze that distorted their very human forms. Moira's tiny brain didn't process what it was seeing in theological terms, but in terms of fear. The struggle was violent. The shouting man. She recognized him, not by his face, which was shadowed, but by his gait, the set of his shoulders, and the way his massive gold signet ring caught the brief flash of light as he raised his arm. It was Father Kieran Doyle, the parish priest, a man known more for his severe demeanor and his deep-seated connections to the landed gentry than for his gentle piety. The person he was struggling with, it wasn't St. John, it was a woman, a real, living woman, her hair escaping her shawl, her hand clutching a small, leather-bound, Legura ledger that, to the adult eye, that looked exactly like the one kept by the local tenants' league which had been causing the gentry so much trouble. Moira watched, paralyzed by a very non-miraculous dread, as Father Doyle forced the ledger from the woman's grasp. He held it up, tearing pages from it with a shocking, tearing sound that was instantly swallowed by the returning rain. He hissed a single name, a name that echoed in Moira's memory for decades. Nolan. Then, as suddenly as the conflict began, it stopped. The priest took the woman's arm, not gently, and dragged her away towards the back of the church, away from the village. The canvas remained, the lantern flickering behind it, looking like a solemn, silent tableau. The scene was set. It was just at that moment, as the rain intensified, that Moira felt a massive hand clamp down on her shoulder. "Moira Glynn, what in God's name are you doing out here in the dark?" It was Uncle Seamus, his face pale and contorted, less in anger and more in sheer panic. He didn't wait for an answer. He spun her around, and just as he did, he saw them, the other villagers, their eyes wide and fixed on the gable wall, drawn not by the fading light of the staged struggle, but by the first, loud, panicked cry of the first official witness, Mary Byrne, who was hurrying towards the church from the other direction, already falling to her knees in what she genuinely believed was an act of divine wonder. Seamus didn't hesitate. He thrust Moira towards the group, his hand pressing hard on her back. "Go get in with the others and bear witness," he whispered fiercely, his eyes darting between his niece, the silent staged canvas, and the approaching crowd. Moira, terrified and confused, found herself shoved into the line of people, her small body jostling against the adults. She looked back one last time at the gable, and the lantern, flickering alone now, its light cold and utterly empty of divinity. She had seen the setup. She had heard the secret word. The hidden miracle wasn't a blessing. It was a distraction. And the youngest witness was now trapped in the middle of a holy lie. "Ah, so you're still with me then? Good on ya." Because the moment Moira was pushed into that frantic praying crowd, the true secret of Knock began to ferment, like bad poutine. This wasn't about faith now. It was about fear and the terrifying silence imposed by power. Moira was a smart wee thing. She knew what she'd seen. She knew the miracle was a theater, a dark play put on by the priest and maybe others, designed to hide something terrible. But when she looked around at the faces of the genuine believers, the old women weeping into their aprons, the men muttering prayers they'd forgotten years ago, she felt the immense, suffocating pressure of the crowd. This was bigger than her fear of Agnes's sharp tongue. This was a community desperate for something to believe in, something to lift them out of the mud and the despair of rural poverty. And her Uncle Seamus, the man who had always been her quiet anchor, was standing right there, his eyes fixed on her, sending a silent message sharper than any reprimand. "Silence. Keep your mouth shut." The immediate aftermath was pure chaos, a beautiful, frightening kind of madness. Reporters arrived from Dublin, then London, descending like hungry crows. The little, grey church became the very eye of a storm. But for Moira, the true storm was happening inside the small cottage. Agnes, suddenly the doting aunt of a witness, became fiercely protective, pulling Moira from school and keeping her close. This wasn't love. It was control. Agnes saw the attention as a ladder. She started subtly changing Moira's account, softening the sharp edges. Moira had mentioned the shuffling shadows, but Agnes insisted it was the movement of glorious figures. Moira had tried to talk about the torn ledger, but Agnes snapped. "That was the blessed lamb, child. Don't confuse the holy word." It was Seamus, the stone carver, who truly terrified her. One evening, after the last of the official investigators of Seville, a pale man from Tuam had left, Seamus called Moira into his workshop. The air smelled of cold stone dust and linseed oil. He didn't shout. He just knelt down, his massive granite dust hands resting on her small shoulders. "Moira," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "Tell me exactly what you saw before you joined the others." Moira, trusting him despite his panic that night, stammered out the truth. The canvas, the shouting, Father Doyle, and the woman with the leather book. And then, she remembered the name. He said Nolan. "Uncle," he shouted Nolan when he took the book. Seamus went rigid. His eyes, usually the color of a calm grey sky, were suddenly turbulent. He pulled something from his apron pocket. It was the silver locket she had been searching for near the tomb. It wasn't a family keepsake at all. It was a cheap, new locket, and it was empty. "This locket," Seamus said, his grip painful. "It's a signal, Moira. A sign. What the priest was trying to take. That wasn't just a book. That was the muster roll." The muster roll. In the turbulent heart of Mayo in the 1880s, the Tenant League was everything. It was the fight for survival against the ruthless English landlords. The muster roll was the list of everyone who had refused to pay the impossible rent, everyone who was part of the silent, desperate resistance. To have that list fall into the hands of the landlords or their enforcers, or worse, a priest deeply indebted to them, would mean eviction, starvation, ruin for hundreds of families. Father Doyle Seamus continued, his voice heavy with self-loathing. "He's been compromised. The wealthy landlords, the ones who owned this village and half of Connaught, they offered him a deal. They threatened to expose his own secrets, his gambling debts in Galway, his questionable land deals. They wanted that roll to break the back of the resistance, and they used the darkness of the church grounds to make the exchange." Seamus' secret then tumbled out. He hadn't just been carving tombstones, he was the keeper of the roll, the man trusted by the League to protect the names. He had intended to bury the roll safely in the crypt behind the church that night, inside the false bottom of his own family's tombstone, the one with the off-center cross. The locket was meant to be a simple, false marker, a distraction. But Father Doyle, getting desperate, had arrived early, ambushing the real messenger, relative of Simus, who had been secretly carrying the roll. The fight Moira saw was the priest seizing the roll before it could be safely hidden. The apparition was the priest's brilliant, wicked cover-up. By creating a mass religious diversion, he ensured three things. The focus would be off his criminal activity, the roll would be secured, and any potential witness like the real messenger, who was now dragged away, would be instantly discredited by the overwhelming holiness of the moment. I saw Doyle dragging the woman away. Uncle Moira whispered, "Who was she?" Seamus's eyes squeezed shut, a single tear cutting a path through the dust on his cheek. That was Eileen O'Connell, a brave soul. She was the one meant to hand the roll to me. She fought him, Moira, and now, she's gone. He looked at his niece, his guilt, a terrible, physical weight. I panicked. I saw the crowd coming, and I saw my chance. I shoved you forward, Moira, to join the witnesses. If you were a holy witness, your presence would sanctify the lie. And more importantly, you wouldn't be looking for the roll anymore. I made you part of the cover-up to save my own skin, and the names on that list. He crushed the locket in his hand. You are the youngest witness, Moira. You saw the truth. If you speak, you expose Father Doyle, you shatter the faith of thousands, and you sign the eviction papers for hundreds of families. Agnes wants you to be a saint. Doyle wants you to be silent. I need you to be the best liar in Mayo. Moira, just 7 years old, looked at the world, and it looked back at her, terrifyingly complex. The miracle of Knock wasn't a lie of God. It was a lie of man, a beautiful, necessary darkness built on fear and a stolen list of names. The true secret wasn't buried in the churchyard, but in the heart of the stone carver, and now, in the terror of the youngest witness. Well, isn't that a right tangle? The truth is a luxury the poor can't afford. And little Moira found herself holding the keys to the kingdom, or the cage, depending on your view. Seamus was now a silent accomplice, but the pressure was far from over. The following months were a dizzying blur of pilgrims, reporters, and the suffocating presence of Father Doyle. The priest, basking in his sudden, holy fame, seemed to keep a constant, cold eye on Moira. He wasn't looking for reverence. He was looking for cracks in her silence. Moira, forced to repeat the sanitized version of the vision, the beautiful figures, and the silent grace, began to feel the weight of the lie pressing down on her. Every time she spoke, the lie grew stronger, more powerful, feeding the faith of the desperate crowds. She became a prop, a child saint in the relentless theater of the newly dubbed Shrine of Knock. The official inquiry was a farce. Of course, Doyle controlled the narrative. He presented the witnesses, all of whom had genuinely seen the staged scene after the struggle had ended, and he dismissed any inconsistencies with the wave of a hand, declaring them the natural confusion of all. But the crucial moment came when the investigators asked Moira about the light. "Child," the lead investigator asked, his voice oily and patronizing, "describe the heavenly light. Was it brighter than the sun?" Moira remembered the single, flickering stone lantern, the harsh, concentrated beam. She remembered the fire in Father Doyle's eyes. She knew the truth. But she looked over at the crowd of onlookers, mostly her neighbors, people whose lives would be ruined if Seamus's secret was exposed. She saw her Uncle Seamus standing near the back, his stone-carving hands clenched tight, and she remembered the terror in Eileen O'Connell's face. So, Moira gave the answer Agnes had drilled into her, but with a tiny, subtle twist. "It wasn't like the sun, sir," she whispered, her voice tiny and wavering. "It was ... focused. Only on them. It felt contained." The investigator smiled, nodding a miracle contained by grace. Beautifully put, child. They interpreted her words as profound theological insight, but Moira meant it literally. The light was contained by the gauze in the walls. A stage lamp used to draw the eye away from the darkness. This moment of accidental genius, her ability to use the truth to reinforce the lie, cemented her place as the most credible witness. Doyle breathed a sigh of relief, but Seamus, watching from the back, saw the truth behind her eyes. He knew his niece was not a saint, but a hostage to the conspiracy. The next few weeks brought a new, terrifying development. Agnes, thrilled by the sudden influx of small donations and gifts sent to the youngest witness, decided to move. She wanted to be closer to the center of the growing shrine, closer to the source of power. She decided they would move into a small, attached house provided by the Parisha house right next to Father Doyle's residence. It was a gilded cage, putting Moira under the priest's direct, constant surveillance. As they packed their sparse belongings, Seamus was like a ghost. He knew this move meant he was losing his only window to protect her. He took Moira into the yard one last time. "Moira," he said, his voice ragged, "I need you to remember one thing, Mokroy. My heart, the roll Doyle has. He won't destroy it. It's his insurance. He'll keep it hidden, close. Somewhere he can use it as leverage, either against the tenants or against the landlords, should they turn on him." He reached into the wall of their old cottage chimney, where the damp peat smoke had permanently stained the stone. He pulled out a small, crudely drawn map, almost like a child's scribble. It was a diagram of the church grounds, drawn on the back of an old delivery receipt for limestone. This is the church and the presbytery, the priest's house. Study this. Learn it. Remember the shadows. The roll must be hidden somewhere that only a child, or a man of stone, could access. He pointed to a specific spot on the diagram, a small, unmarked area near the base of a forgotten, crumbling rainwater downspout at the back of Doyle's coal shed. The notation next to it was simply 1872. Moira committed the image to memory. The year 1872. That was the year Seamus's mother, Moira's grandmother, had died. It was the year Seamus had secretly carved a small drainage channel for the original church foundation stone. A channel now covered by decades of dirt and neglect. A place designed to be secret, even from the builders. It's a long shot, child. A mad scramble, Seamus admitted. But if you find it, don't take it to the authorities. They're all in his pocket. You must take it to Liam Brady in Westport. He's the league's new leader. He'll know what to do. As they moved into the new house, Moira felt the silence of the conspiracy grow heavier. She was no longer just a witness. She was the living memory of a dark deal. And she was now living literally under the shadow of the very man who had fabricated a miracle to hide a crime. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place a week later. She was playing in the small walled garden between their house and the priest's, a place forbidden to her. But her curiosity was now stronger than her fear. She saw Father Doyle exiting the coal shed, not with coal, but with a small brass-handled shovel. As he walked away, she noticed something glinting in the dirt near the old downspout. It was a tiny scrap of dark, oily leather, a fragment of the ledger binding. The roll was there, hidden by the priest in a secret pre-carved space beneath the very ground he walked on, guarded by decades of dirt and the overwhelming lie of the miracle. The youngest witness, the child forced to sell a lie for the salvation of her community, was now planning her escape and her silent rebellion. Now, the pace quickens, doesn't it? We've got a child saint, a compromised priest, a secret map, and a roll of names that holds the fate of a village. This isn't a story of heavenly intervention. It's a pure, dark Irish thriller. Moira knew she couldn't rush this. Father Doyle, for all his newfound holiness, was a shrewd, patient man. He kept her close, using her presence as a kind of human shield. Any accusation against him would mean pulling down the testimony of the very child who authenticated his miracle. He was brilliantly protected by his own lie. The challenge wasn't just finding the roll, it was getting out of Knocker village, now swarming with pilgrims and observers, without Agnes or Father Doyle noticing her absence. Her escape had to be as silent and unseen as the original apparition itself. Her opportunity came during the Feast of Our Lady of Knock, 6 months after the initial event. The village was completely overwhelmed. Trains from all over Ireland were disgorging thousands of the faithful. Agnes was in her element, holding court and accepting offerings, thoroughly distracted by the glow of her reflected piety. Father Doyle, however, was stressed, running the enormous logistical operation and giving countless sermons. Moira used the chaos. She had observed the routine. Every morning before dawn, Father Doyle would go to the coal shed, ostensibly to check the parish's supplies. This was his moment with the roll, a quick check to ensure his leverage was safe. She prepared her own tools, a strong spoon stolen from the kitchen, a small linen sack, and a borrowed pair of Seamus's work gloves, which were miles too big but necessary for the freezing dirt. She also had a small piece of chalk. She knew that simply digging up the roll wasn't enough. She needed to leave a message, a signal to Seamus, just in case she failed or was caught. The night of the feast was a fog of incense and whispered prayers. Moira slipped out of the attached house just after midnight, using the cover of the constant noise, the murmuring of the crowds who slept outdoors, seeking an overnight vigil. The silence of the stone shed contrasted sharply with the religious frenzy outside the church. The coal shed was dark and smelled of heavy, wet fuel. She found the rainwater downspout near the back wall, exactly where Seamus's map indicated. She looked for the year, 1872, and realized it wasn't written on the stone, but marked by the particular way the downspout was attached to the foundation, a slight, almost invisible offset in the brickwork that only a stone carver would notice. Kneeling down, she began to dig with a spoon. The soil was compacted and icy, but after a frantic 10 minutes, she hit something hard and flat. It was a small, carved slate tile, meticulously placed. With trembling fingers, she pried it up. Beneath the tile was a narrow, shallow trench. And there it was, the muster roll. Not a ledger, as she had first thought, but a heavy oilskin-wrapped cylinder of paper, tied with a simple twine, the kind of wrapping designed to survive a harsh Irish winter in the ground. It was heavier than she expected, thick with the names and the stories of hundreds of families. She slipped the roll into the linen sack, but before she covered the spot, she reached into the trench again. The priest had not just stored the roll here, he had kept his own insurance. Hidden beneath the roll was a second, smaller document, a yellowed handwritten note, sealed with the crest of a powerful landlord family. It was a confession, signed by Father Doyle, admitting to embezzling funds from the parish's poor box to cover his Galway gambling debts, and a promise that, in exchange for the landlord's silence, he would deliver the tenant league's roll to them. Doyle hadn't just created a miracle, he had sold his soul, and the souls of his flock, for a few shillings and his own reputation. Moira took both the roll and the confession note. They were her only weapons. She carefully replaced the dirt in the slate tile. Then, she took her chalk and, reaching up high onto the back wall of the coal shed, a spot no adult would casually look, she drew a crude, but unmistakable symbol. The off-center cross of the Nolan tombstone. Seamus would see it. It meant, the secret is exposed. I am gone. Her next move was the hardest. She couldn't walk towards the main road, which was full of pilgrims. She had to walk against the flow of faith, towards the deep, dark countryside. Her destination, Westport, 20 long miles away. Journey a 7-year-old could barely imagine making on foot, carrying the secret of a nation. She crept out of the parish grounds, using the long, dense hedgerows as cover. The glow of the candles from the shrine cast an eerie, false light over the fields. As she walked, she imagined the priest finding the empty spot in the coal shed. She imagined the roar of his fury, the moment his manufactured miracle would begin to crack under the weight of his own panic. She kept walking, her small shadow swallowed by the night. She was no longer just Moira Glynn, the youngest witness. She was the one who had taken the dark secret of Knock and was carrying it into the light. Her journey, alone, across the fields of Mayo, was the true, silent pilgrimage of that dark, unforgettable night. Well now, if your heart isn't beating faster than a greyhound chasing a rabbit, you haven't been paying attention. Moira is out on the road, a wee, terrified courier carrying the evidence of a holy fraud. But nothing is ever simple in the west of Ireland. ASTR. The road to Westport was a long, muddy nightmare for a small child. Moira walked through the dawn, the heavy, wet air of Mayo chilling her to the bone. Every shadow was Father Doyle. Every passing cart was a threat. She clutched the linen sack to her chest, feeling the hard cylinder of the muster roll and the brittle paper of the confession note. These weren't just documents. They were the power that had been used to silence her, and now they were her key to freedom. Back in Knock, the truth began to unravel with the morning light. Seamus, the stone carver, was the first to realize. He went to the coal shed, pretending to look for kindling, his heart pounding a desperate rhythm against his ribs. He saw the disturbed earth, and then, his eyes finding the high chalk-drawn symbol, the off-center cross. His niece was gone, and the secret was, to a wave of profound relief and sheer, unadulterated terror washed over him. She had succeeded, but now she was alone and exposed. Father Doyle discovered the theft an hour later. The moment he saw the empty space, his manufactured piety vanished, replaced by a pure, animalistic rage. He didn't care about the muster roll. He cared about the confession note. That single piece of paper would not only ruin him but would also discredit the entire shrine, bringing the full force of the Catholic hierarchy down upon his head. He immediately sent out word. Not to the police, of course. He couldn't risk an official search. He sent word to his powerful landlord allies, the very men named in the confession. He told them that the youngest witness has been taken, and she holds vital information that could damage the church's reputation. Find her and bring her back, quietly. They understood the code. The truth must die with the witness. Moira, meanwhile, was struggling. She was hungry, exhausted, and her legs were aching with the unfamiliar distance. She finally reached a small, isolated farmstead, not 10 miles from Westport, a place called Bale. A kind, middle-aged woman named Nora Tierney was milking her cow in the yard. Nora, seeing the tiny travel-stained child, immediately stopped and rushed to her. God love you, child. What on earth are you doing out here, all alone? Moira, too exhausted to lie, simply stammered out, I need to find Liam Brady in Westport. It's urgent. For the Tenant League, that name was a key. Nora Tierney's husband was a staunch League man. Nora instantly knew this was no ordinary runaway child. She took Moira inside, warmed her by the fire, and gave her a bowl of thick, nourishing broth. You're safe here, a Challenbeeg little girl, Nora said gently, but her eyes were worried. She knew the League's business was dangerous. Moira, feeling the first warmth of true safety since that night at Knock, showed Nora the sack and its contents. Nora, a practical, unromantic woman, didn't believe in miracles, but she believed in the power of a landlord's greed. When she read the names on the muster roll and the awful truth of Father Doyle's confession, she gasped. This, Nora whispered, tapping the confession, this is what they'll kill for, not the roll. This breaks the man and the lie. But as they talked, a heavy black carriage pulled up outside, its wheels crunching on the gravel. It was the landlord's enforcer, a hulking man named Connell, who had been tasked by Doyle's allies to scour the road. He knocked hard on the door. Open up, I'm looking for a runaway child, a witness from Knock. They say she's been taken by ruffians. Nora's face went white. She thrust the sack containing the roll and the confession back into Moira's hands. The shed. Go out the back, cut across the fields. Don't stop for anything. Moira, fueled by a terrifying surge of adrenaline, fled through the back door and plunged into the high damp fields. She heard Connell's heavy boots inside the cottage, followed by the sound of a struggle and Nora's sharp cry of protest. The child saint of Knock was running for her life, carrying not a prayer book, but the damning evidence of an institution's dark heart. The chase was brutal. Conal, a fast, relentless man, caught sight of a small figure struggling through the thick undergrowth. He shouted, a deep, terrifying roar that was more wolf than man. Moira knew she couldn't outrun him. Then she saw it, the river, the Owenmore, fast and deep, cutting a dark path towards the sea. She had one choice. She scrambled down the muddy bank, the sack still clutched tight. She took one last, desperate breath, and plunged into the icy, churning water. The secret of Knock was now fighting for its life against the current, racing towards the sea, determined to reach Westport and the justice that waited there. And here we are, facing the last few pages of the darkest chapter in Knock's history. Will the little lie-keeper make it? Will the truth, cold and hard as the stones of Mayo, finally surface? There's one more great twist. Moland. The river was a terrifying, icy baptism. Moira, despite her small size, was surprisingly strong, thanks to years of hard living in Mayo. She held a linen sack above the water, sacrificing her own warmth and speed to protect the documents. Conal, the enforcer, stood on the bank, roaring obscenities, unwilling to brave the treacherous current in his heavy coat. Moira made it to the opposite bank, soaked and shivering, but alive. She kept running until her lungs burned, eventually collapsing near the edge of a small, busy town. It wasn't Westport, but it was close enough. She found a fisherman preparing his boat at the docks. His name was Paddy, a man with a kind, weathered face. Moira, trembling, managed to gasp out the name Liam Brady. The role, not Paddy, a League sympathizer, recognized the coded language. He took one look at her desperate state and the dark sack she held. He didn't ask questions. He put her on his small, open fishing boat, covered her with an oilskin tarp, and motored quickly towards the safety of Westport's larger harbor. Liam Brady, a man known for his quiet integrity and his fierce dedication to the tenants, was waiting on the Westport quay. Paddy had sent a coded message ahead. When Moira, soaking and exhausted, was helped onto the dock, she looked up at Brady, her eyes full of the fear and the fierce determination of her journey. She pulled out the two documents, the muster roll and the confession note. Brady unrolled the muster roll first. He ran his hand over the hundreds of names, the names of the families on the brink of ruin. He was holding their survival, their future. He looked at Moira with immense respect. Then, he read the confession note. His face, usually calm, became a mask of cold fury. Father Doyle sold the poor box and then fabricated a miracle to steal this, he muttered, shaking the muster roll. He wrapped a political crime in a holy light. Liam Brady knew the power of the Catholic Church. Simply revealing the truth wouldn't be enough. Doyle would deny it, and the believers would choose the miracle over the mundane corruption. Brady knew that, to save the tenants, he couldn't just expose the priest. He had to preserve the miracle. Here is the final, agonizing twist. The hidden secret that the Church of Knock buried. Brady took the confession note and quietly, deliberately, tore it into 1,000 tiny pieces, dropping them into the wind over the harbor. Moira watched, horrified. No, why? Brady looked her in the eye, his expression heavy with the burden of leadership. Because, Allenby, the truth of the priest's crime dies with that paper. If we expose Doyle's corruption, the landlords will use the scandal to shatter the faith of the people, evict everyone on this roll, and crush the League forever. The scandal would be too great. The church would fall back on the miracle, and the tenants would be defenseless. He held up the muster roll. This is what matters. Not justice for the priest, but life for the people. Doyle loses his insurance. The roll is safe, and the League survives. And the miracle ... He looked back towards the distant hills where Knock lay. The miracle must stand. It gives the people hope. It draws the crowds. It keeps the village prosperous. We let the lie live, Moira, so that hundreds of true lives can be saved. We trade the truth of a saint for the salvation of a people. Liam Brady had made the impossible choice. The institution of the Church of Knock, unwittingly, became the protector of the tenants. The lie that began as a cover-up for greed ended up becoming the accidental savior of a community. The priest's fear had saved the people. The secret was now buried under the weight of an accepted miracle. A beautiful, powerful lie that the youngest witness, Moira Glynn, had inadvertently helped create and, ultimately, helped protect. Moira didn't become a saint. She became something far more important, a silent guardian of the truth, the only soul who knew that the holiest place in Ireland was founded on a stolen list of names and a terrifyingly human crime. She saved her people, not with prayer, but with a spoon, a map, and a long cold run through the dark. And Father Doyle, he remained the parish priest, celebrated, powerful, but living in a silent private terror, knowing that the evidence of his conspiracy was now out of his reach, controlled by the very people he had tried to betray. He was a prisoner of the miracle he had fabricated. He could never confess, never speak the truth, for fear of losing everything. The lie was his cross to bear. And there you have it, me darlings. The real story of that wet, grey night in Mayo. A true miracle is a simple thing, really. It's a child's courage, a man's guilt, and a choice made in the dark. It's not about what they saw, but about what they hid. The secret of the youngest witness wasn't a vision. It was a sacrifice. The silence that night wasn't reverence. It was a promise. If this story has given you pause, if you feel the chill of the real history beneath the accepted tale, then hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below. Would you have destroyed the confession to save the people? Would you allow a dark lie to protect a bright future? Share this story with someone who only knows the surface of the legend, and let them see the true shadows of Knock. Go Rabe Moth Agate. Thank you, and I'll see you in the shadows.